The Ad hoc Committee on Gang Violence and Youth Development will now come to order. We have 6 items on the agenda. Some of the items we're just going to have some minimal discussions on because we'll have to put them over for various reasons. For example, item number 5, the CAO report was just released, and because of the Brown Act, the CAO report was not posted. So it would be inappropriate for us to have discussions surrounding that at this time. But although the chairman, myself, I will be out of the country for the next 10 days, and the council will be recessing after the 17th, I do anticipate that the vice chair of this committee will be having a hearing to hear item number 5 in the next week to 2 weeks, or week and a half, I should say. And in addition to that, we anticipate that at least one more item that gets put over today will be heard on that committee date as well. So we'll begin by going over item number 1.
Item number 1, communication from the mayor relative to request for authority to accept grant for fiscal year 2008 California Gang Reduction, Intervention, and Prevention Program, award number GRO 701-7250, and related matters. Thank you.
Jeff Card, Deputy Mayor for Gang Reduction Youth Development. This item is simply a request to approve the acceptance of a grant that our office was awarded through the California, the Cal GRIP program. We were approximately $1 million after the state takes their percentage, so it comes to $962,000, was awarded to us to fund prevention and intervention and our comprehensive strategy in the Boyle Heights, Hollenbeck area.
Okay, thank you. And that money was, the language by the state was that money was not citywide, et cetera. It was specific for a particular program in a particular community, correct?
It was set aside for the city of Los Angeles, and we've decided to put it into this particular site.
It's my understanding the previous speaker did delineate that he wanted it to be used in the Boyle Heights area.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't think it's in the language, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because sometimes they may give us money that's a line item in the budget, and then we do good things with it in various parts of the city, but this particular one was for that area.
That's right.
And that was part of his district, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Now, when it comes to the cost for ongoing prevention services, apparently there's enough funds identified for 18 months of these services. Have we identified, once those 18 months are over, how we're going to provide the services for the subsequent year or so?
No, not any more than we've, figured out how we'll provide services across the city beyond this fiscal year. I believe 19 million of our 24 million plus dollars is from the general fund, so obviously that has to be allocated on an annual basis.
Okay, all right. The new speaker doesn't have Boyle Heights in her district, so I'm not sure. It doesn't mean she can't, but
That's
I'm not
correct.
sure she's going to refund that line item. Okay. Now, when it comes to the matching funds, a lot of these funds are going to be done in kind, and we're positive, we're comfortable that it doesn't require a straight-up cash allotment. It can be done with in-kind contributions.
Well, I believe it's a cash match, but you have to show where that cash is coming from. But you can use any number of resources to fund the comprehensive strategy as part of the match. So, for example, all of the CLEAR officers, which are funded through the state SLES program, as well as general fund, can go towards the match. Any other federal grants or dollars that we would get or earmarks that we would get could be used as part of the match as well. So we have plenty of money to match, as well as general fund dollars.
So we're comfortable that we understand the language on the match, and we're not going to get yanked and told, hey, wait a minute, you're doing great work out there in LA, but that's not considered.
Yeah, we're fine on the matches.
Okay, good. Glad to hear that. All right. Okay. Do you have any questions on item 1?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anybody here from the public to speak on item number 1? Seeing and hearing none, Public comment is now open on item number 1. And no one coming forward. Okay. We'll close public comment on item number 1. At this time, the committee will request the CAO to include the total amount of the funding allocated to the implementation of ISIS. Also, the committee will request ITA, CDD, and CAO to report back to committee relative to the implementation of ISIS. We don't have a CAO report on this matter. It's our understanding the CAO will have it in early January. Okay. So with that, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to hold this in committee pending the CAO report. Everything else seems fine. I just want to make sure the CAO renders their document, and then we have it on the record. Again, these are public meetings. I don't want anybody to come back and say that, you know, they didn't understand what we were doing or why we were doing what we're doing, et cetera. So, and I just, as a habit, I don't know about the rest of the council members, but when I chair committees, I don't appreciate it when the CAO doesn't have their reports done on time. And at this time, all they've been able to tell us is that it'll be ready soon. Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your report. Okay. Next, we have item number 2.
Item number 2, communication from the mayor's office relative to recommendations for the selection of GRYD zones, prevention services providers, and related matters.
Jeff Carrigan from the Mayor's Office of Gang Reduction Youth Development. We released a proposal, an RFP process, on October 1st of 2008 for implementation of gang prevention services in 6 gang reduction youth development zones. And the amount of money available to be awarded was over a total of, over 6 months, was a total of $3 million or $500,000 per gang reduction youth development zone. Those 6 zones are 77th Division 2, Boyle Heights, Hollenbeck, Panorama City Mission, Rampart, Southwest 2, and Watts Southeast. As you recall, there were needs assessments were done in each one of these targeted communities where we have the gang reduction youth development zones last spring and summer, except for the Boyle Heights Hollenbeck area, where we have the existing gang reduction program that was funded through the federal government. We did a needs assessment there about 2.5 years ago. So we, thanks to the help of Councilmember Jose Huizar's office, in the advancement project, we did we provide some supplemental sources of data for that particular zone. We actually, the proposals were actually submitted on November 3rd. We went through a review process of those proposals, a very extensive review process. There were a total of 39 proposals that were committed. Actually, 3 were actually deemed ineligible and were disqualified, and actually 2 proposals were voluntarily withdrawn by the applicant organization. Our office did a minimum eligibility requirement screen of those to get to those 34 proposals. We then had a process of reviewing the written proposals, and there were review panels that were actually assembled in each one of the 6 targeted areas, which consisted of 5 members from 5 different disciplines. There was education, law enforcement and prosecution agencies, gang experts or researchers, relevant city or county social services departments, and then a community resident from that targeted area. Each reviewer received training on the review process and was required to sign a conflict of interest non-disclosure statement form that indicated they had no direct or indirect financial interest in reviewing the applications. During that first review process, each application was rated with 100 points possible for that review. Where there were significant differences in the reviewer, the individual reviewers, there was the facilitation of a lead rater in each group, and the review panels discussed the results and actually came to a consensus. And thereafter, the average of the reviewer scores was calculated for a written score. And then based upon that written score, organizations were ranked within each one of these 6 grid zones. At that point, then, an oversight committee, which was made up of 6 members, reviewed them, which was really to give us a broader sense and consistency for all proposals across all of the zones. That panel consisted of 6 members who represented education, public health, criminal justice system, violence prevention, social services, and workforce development. And the committee members there actually reviewed the top two rated proposals in each one of the six grid zones in preparation for the interview process, which I'll mention in a minute. And during that process, actually no scores were changed as a result of that process. And then the fourth level review was actually interviews and site visits with the top scoring applicants. So the top two scoring applicants in each one of the grid zones were invited to an interview process that was conducted at the proposer's headquarters or the site of their choosing. The interview panel was comprised of one representative from the Grid Oversight Committee, as well as two members of the local community rating team for each grid zone. And then that interview panel used a rating tool that was developed by our office and approved by the Oversight Committee, specifically related to an interview and a site visit. A total possible points for the interview portion was actually 50. Actually, we then used that score, combined it with the top two raters, the written evaluation score, to come up with the final scores. We sent a letter to all 12 agencies informing of their final scores, which was the written review plus a site visit interview review. And then we have our preliminary funding recommendations that were made today. Contingent upon an appeals process. We did have an appeals process that actually gave the opportunity for any organization who so choose to actually file an appeal. The appeals board was comprised of representatives from the Grid Oversight Committee, a federal department, and a county department. That group actually met on December 1st. We also had a representative from the city attorney's office who actually met with the appeals board representatives to brief them on the appeals process, what their role and responsibilities were as board members, and also having them sign a conflict of interest statement as well. The appeals process was done. There was only one agency that actually filed an appeal or submitted an appeal, which was the Watts Labor Community Action Committee in the Watts Southeast area. After review, the appeals board determined that no changes in the score would be made for the Watts Labor Community Action Committee, and the board denied the request for reconsideration after determining that the mayor's office had applied the rules of the RFP fairly and equitably. And so after that appeal process was completed, all the organizations were provided written notification from the mayor's office of their final score, and then we submitted the transmittal to council, which is where we are today.
Okay. Thank you. I have a couple questions. We do have some cards on this item. We'll take questions. The committee members will ask you some questions, and then we'll go to the public. So what's the criteria for selection of the GRID's review committee?
It was those five categories that I mentioned to you in terms of education, representative, law enforcement, or probation, our prosecution agencies, gang experts or researchers, relevant city or county social service departments, and community residents. So we looked for people with those that were a part of those five different categories from each one and had familiarity or did work professionally or lived in those particular targeted areas.
And approximately, what's the number of people engaged in that review committee? I don't want to know names or
no, it's
organizations.
Five. So it's those five folks in each one of the six areas. So each of the six grid zones had a 5-person review committee that was made up of folks who represented those different disciplines.
So based on the process, you anticipate through a process like this, you'll have 30 or less members. You might have 23 because maybe 3 people are definitely qualified to be on the review committee for 2 or 3 different areas or what have you. So it's not exactly 30 different bodies. It's
30 different representatives. I believe we had, I'd have to, do you know how many exactly we had? Okay. You could be a lower number, you're correct, but the maximum would be 30 different people.
Okay. All right. Do any of these individuals sit on the appeals board when they go through?
No, the appeals board actually has one. It has one representative from that oversight committee, the 6-person oversight committee that was the second layer of review, and then it has 2 other folks from outside. One was from a federal department, one from a county department.
So the appeals, the people who look at the appeals are 3 individuals?
That's correct.
Okay. And only one of them has some semblance of
One was a part of the oversight committee, so they actually read all 12 proposals, and the other two were non-biased people to give. We didn't want to have anyone, have stack the appeals board with people who might have a self-interest completely in the fact that they had been a part of the review process.
So basically, people who are involved in the appeals were not part of the first round of scoring.
One person was, and two people were not.
Okay, so one. And who determines which one of those individuals is also part of the appeals board?
We
was that
asked,
name and-
we worked with them to see both one who was available and also who we thought would be a good representative.
Okay, so that's the cross-section of determining that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, is it inherent or left up to the contractors to understand that they do have the right to state their case to the council?
We actually,
aside from the formal appeal.
we sent them a full appeal process, letting them know how the appeal worked. I don't believe in this letter that it states that they can also appeal to the city council directly, but certainly people can, as you know.
Well, people who understand the legislative process and the fact that we live in a democracy, those individuals, for example, any lobbyist in the city of LA knows that anything that goes to a vote of the council can be formally or informally appealed, or people can come and sit in our office until we finally sit down with them and hear what they have to say, et cetera. But you may want to clarify that as well, because a lot of organizations don't understand that. And with all due respect, I mean, it's not about hiding the ball from our vantage point. I just want to make sure that people understand that is the way the process works. They don't have to wear a tie to come talk to us. They don't have to hire a lobbyist to talk to us. If they have something to say, they have a right and responsibility to try to get our attention, be it in committee or try to come in with the individuals, council members. So if you don't mind, either you can point that fact out in the next go-rounds or what have you, but also, obviously, you would word it that that's not part of the official appeals process like you just described.
Right.
That's just part of the democracy that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Just like you're explaining this to us, to the council committee, you may be asked to explain it as well to the council body. And therefore, public comment can take place there as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just people who work for the city who get to talk to us. And I'm obviously talking past you right now and making sure that everybody understands that. You get it, Jeff, but
Sure.
I just want to make sure everybody else does. Any questions?
Yeah,
By the way, we have 3 cards from...
okay. Well, I mean, obviously, I was obviously very interested in the final 2 for, the Watts Southwest Grid Zone. It looked like Conservation Corps and WLCIC were very, very close. I mean, it was a couple points.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to understand the appeal process as well. And I'm just kind of looking at some of the information I have in front of me. And WLCAC has asked that your office accept the appeal for review and report back to this committee regarding the specific points.
Yeah, I think.
What does that mean to accept the appeal?
Well, you'd have to ask WLCAC
Okay.
what that means. I think our appeals board, when they reviewed this appeal, there were actually, if you saw, and I went through the appeals procedures, which was mailed to all of the organizations who weren't successful, that they actually had an opportunity to appeal through one of 2 categories. One, that if the application was determined to be ineligible, this determination would include non-responsive applications or an application that failed to meet other specified submission application eligibility service and activities.
That wasn't this appeal.
Right. Then
Right.
The second one was demonstrated procedural errors in the review process and or the review of the appellant's application that resulted in unequal treatment. And it's my understanding that the appeals board felt like actually there were no procedural errors, that actually the review committees had administered the review process fairly and equitably, and that there was no unequal treatment that they could
So that was
identify.
the standard by whether or not you accepted
That was the
appeal.
standard that was sent out and communicated clearly to folks.
So there, in your mind, there wasn't a need to go point by point, score by score, and
Well, I think that-
give them an opportunity to,
I think that the thing that the appeals board said that would have been unfair, if you do that for one organization, then if another organization didn't have to appeal, or they didn't happen to appeal and they had scored higher and we readjusted their score based on that individual review and duplicated the original process we went through, that it wouldn't be fair and equal treatment for all the agencies that were involved in the process, because we would have been re-reviewing one particular application in terms of the detailed questions related to their score, as opposed to doing that for everyone. So it would basically require a complete re-review. So they looked more at the process. Was the process fairly and equitably implemented in terms of the review process? But obviously the reviewers, that's why we had reviewers actually be trained to score and to do that process.
okay. So at this point, there's no recourse, or there's no,
In our mind, what we attempted to do was to lay out a very fair and equitable process from start to finish that was also very transparent, so people knew
Right.
how we were going to evaluate proposals, how our
Right.
process was going to
was
work.
there anything taken into account for evaluating the proposal correctly, as opposed to just fair, equitable?
Well, yeah, we actually had a
I mean, if
scoring.
someone actually felt like the reviewers didn't accurately assess the proposal, like they misunderstood something, or was there any room for that?
Well, we actually had a scoring process. I mean, we had multiple people who scored those proposals. And so we had a rubric for which they were trained, actually, before they received the proposals. Here's the various categories. Here's the number of points awarded for. Here, if you look at the RFP, here are the kinds of things that you need to be looking for as you review that process. So they were all trained the same way. They were all asked to do that. And then where there were actually variances between, because you rate a proposal, Councilman rates a proposal, I very differently. If there were significant variances outside the scale of 10 points in our individual reviews, that's where we sat down. We had a consensus meeting with the lead reviewer, who then went through that process with all the various individual reviewers to come up with a consensus. Well, here's how I rated it this way. This is where I saw the strengths, so that then actually the group came up with a consensus
Right.
score for that particular proposal.
Right. But in your appeal process, there really is no place to specifically disagree with how it was rated. It's more like.
Well, if you did it for
Right.
one,
That's what I'm saying.
yeah, it would be difficult to do it.
I'm asking that.
Yeah.
So there's no,
I think the appeals process was to look for, did we fairly and equitably
Right.
administer the process?
right.
If under those circumstances, it was the appeals board determined we didn't fairly and equitably administer the process.
So you could have fairly misinterpreted all proposals equally.
I suppose that's potentially true.
But, and
Or
under
we
your-
could have-
and under the process, that's the only benchmark, is if you equally misinterpreted everything. Yeah,
I think you're looking for consistency. I
Yeah.
guess
yeah. That's interesting.
one of the big
Okay.
criteria on the appeals is, were we consistent?
Yeah. And,
Right.
and did we administer the process the way we described
Right.
it, fairly and equitably?
Right, right.
I mean, because, when people review, and you probably saw the scores from different areas, you had different sort of consensus scores that were very different in terms of those scores in various areas. So some of that is probably the nature of the proposals, and some of that is probably the unique character of the particular review panel that was reviewing those particular proposals. But I think the important thing is we were maintaining a fair process and equitable process in each one of those targeted areas. So there are differences in scores. We didn't rank, for example, 34 proposals, 1 through 34 across the city. We looked at proposals. So the Boyle Heights Hollenbeck proposals were really not competing or compared to in any way, shape, or form in terms of their initial review by anybody in Watts or in the Southeast area. The Oversight Review Committee was looking for a level of consistency in the proposals to ensure that it met the larger standards and minimum standards, and they determined that that was met and didn't make any changes in any of the scores.
Right. I mean, and I'll just say off the bat, I mean, both the organizations, are very well respected. I mean, I'm not saying this to change the outcome necessarily, or I'm just trying to say as we go forward. I mean, I was just looking at I mean, again, because the points were so close that 1 point, 2 points made a difference. And for instance, in under the evaluation, the rating factor was statement of the problem, and they were not given full points because the scope of the gang problem is not noted. In their response, they say, in the RFP, narrative 1 requires the applicant to describe the nature and scope of the problem, not gang problem. And they said they went on to talk about housing, schools, parks, law enforcement. So, but there's no venue for them to come back now, is there? And say, well, we thought it said describe the problem, and yet they were taking points off for not describing the gang problem.
Well,
do you see what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah.
That's just one example. I really haven't gone through it, but I'm
right.
just.
I think the challenge with doing that for one group
Yeah.
is you'd have to be fair to all the other groups, you'd have to open that up and do it for the other 4 organizations who didn't score as well, and reevaluate all of their proposals as well, and basically restart the process all over.
But I mean, I could see, and I'm not looking at the original RFP, so I'm not looking at the language, but I can see right there how that could be, that could be a couple points right there.
Well, except that it is a gang prevention proposal.
But we know from Connie Rice's report that there's a lot of things that play into the problem of gang violence. I'm just saying I can see
right.
how maybe that's. I'm just wondering what the venue is or vehicle is to talk about those kinds of things, or is there? And maybe there never will be.
Well,
because as you said, it would certainly open up the whole process. But
yeah, obviously we feel very good about our recommendations. I think there's no question there was a lot of competition, actually, not only in this round of funding, but in the last round of funding as well. The good thing is that we had enough agencies who were qualified and were very competitive that we had a competitive process.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, again, this goes back to there's not enough resources.
Right. So we have to make, unfortunately, we have to make decisions, and often between multiply good, none of the organizations, that's one of the things we try to emphasize, that none of the organizations that were not successful in funding, it's not a reflection of what we think about their work, it's that there was a competitive process and we had to select the organizations that we thought that were the most capable and most responsive to this particular RFP in terms of the work that we're trying to do in those targeted areas.
So basically, this appeal, there was only one appeal? This was the only
Yeah.
appeal? There was only one appeal. So it's been responded to, it didn't fit into the broad categories of a reason to hear the appeal?
Yeah, well, we feel like their appeal was heard. It was evaluated based on the criteria that we set up,
criteria.
and we've addressed that appeal, and we're moving forward with our recommendations.
Yeah, okay. Is moving forward, is there an opportunity to learn from the appeal or take some of those and see whether or not?
Yeah, we certainly, we actually, we're happy to learn from, we'll learn from this process. We learned actually from the last process. There were some tweaks and some things we did a little differently this time compared to the last time, because we learned from that process. So we're not saying, there's nothing we can't learn from this process to do that. So if you have a suggestion for an idea in the next process, how we might.
Did you write a letter back? Or do we have a copy of that?
I have a copy here. It's dated December 2nd.
Did we get copies of that?
Yeah, we can. Would you like to see it now, or I can
Yeah.
have a copy sent to you?
Yeah. Okay, I think, like I said, I think you have some cards.
Yeah, we have
on
some
this?
cards.
Okay.
By the way, Jeff, the city attorney's office sits on the appeals board?
No, they were just there to advise us. So they advise the appeals board members as to, what the process is, how the city what are the laws and the legality requiring that.
The district
But they
attorney's
don't.
office?
No, the city attorney, our city attorney.
No, but my question is, the district attorney's office, do they have someone on the appeals board?
No.
No, they don't? Oh,
No.
okay. All right. We have some public comment cards. Oh, by the way, procedural question.
Uh-huh.
The interview and the site visit, which one takes place first? The interview or the site
It's
visit?
all part of it.
Okay.
So that we basically do a site visit, and at the site visit, we conducted an interview.
Oh, okay.
So we had a series of questions to follow up on the proposal. Once the proposal was reviewed, then we had a series of questions when we go to the site that is chosen by the agency, where it can either be their headquarters or the site where they were going to do the service. I think people chose different ones. And then we had a rubric that we developed for that, for the site visit interview process, where we sat down and talked to the agencies and their collaboratives about clarifying some things and asking other questions.
I'm dying to ask this question. The El Centro del Pueblo, according to the list, because the breakdown is public, right?
Uh-huh.
What their point scores were. I assume site visit potential was 50 points max.
Uh-huh.
They got 50.
That's why my understanding.
Are you going through El Centro and doing a whole documentary on what a perfect site is like? Because I was surprised. Because a site is so, there's two things I would imagine going on in a site. One is the physical aspect. Wow, they actually have a facility. They actually have it well laid out. They actually have enough room to do things the way they should be done. And then on top of that, I would imagine the site visit also takes into account, well, what are the dynamics going on here? Do they have too many walls keeping it like segmented, or is it the kind of thing where it has the right spacing and openness where you can see that the communication and the flow, both the constituents and the workers, et cetera, is just incredible?
Well, I think it's not just the site, like the physicality of the site. In fact, I didn't make any of these site visits myself, but I don't think the physicality of the site is as important as the people. So many of this would have been the opportunity to watch the collaborative partners who were a part of their original proposal, to see them interact as a group, to listen to them explain how they will collaborate, what will be the client services flow and the tracking system between the various agencies, so that we give you a chance to actually see if there's actually a sense of true collaboration and partnership between these organizations in terms of the review. I mean, in terms of the program delivery plan. That would be probably more important than just purely the physicality of the facility.
Okay.
But certainly that would be a part of that as well.
Well, then maybe they could help train other organizations to know how to do all that.
They apparently scored very well. That's
No,
correct.
not very well. They scored perfectly.
Indeed.
I mean, whenever I've been on scoring stuff, I mean, I don't think I've ever in my life gave a perfect score. That was interesting. Okay. Well, it sounds like they got it together. All
Was
right.
there any other grid zone that had as close of a margin as mine?
Let me see, they're actually on there.
Where is, oh, is that in that total? What's in here?
When it comes to the agency score, the proposal score, one was 91.5 versus 91 first and second.
Yeah.
I think that was the closest, a half a
I
point.
believe the Boyle Heights one was almost as close. Actually, it was as close as the Watts one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, one. Oh, the final.
The final
offsetting
was as close. Yeah.
Site visit and proposal score. Yeah. Okay. Also, you mentioned in answering Ms. Han's one of her questions about a consensus score. Can you go over that again? What did you mean by consensus score?
Well, all 5 of the reviewers were given copies of all the proposals. So then they did their own review using the scoring rubric that they were trained in. And then they came to a consensus meeting, and we went through then the group went through each proposal to see if they were actually within 10 points of each other in terms. So like, let's say you scored 75. Councilwoman Hahn scored a 78 on that proposal, but I scored a 90. Well, that was outside 10. Then we would have a conversation to say, well, you know, I scored 90. What was it that you know, justified that 90? Is it just that you're a tougher rater than I am, and so to try and get anything that was outside 10 points, then we had a conversation and the groups went through proposal by proposal and area by area to look at their section score and then come to a consensus about that particular proposal in terms of their score. So it's to ferret out the you know, 5 different individuals reviewing those proposals initially individually, and then having those folks might be fairly wide in terms of their review process and their scoring. And so then they talk through that. They spend a day, they have a day set up to specifically talk through why they evaluated this, why did they give them whatever their score was for a particular section, and then go through the proposal that way and talk through that and say, well, because, you know, you might say, well, actually, Councilwoman Hahn and I agree basically what their operational plan was, but she gave them a 45 and I gave them a 48. But really, when we talked through it, our score was really the same. You know, in terms of our score wasn't the same, but our justification for the score was, interpretation was the same.
So which one would it be? Would it be the 48 or the
So
45?
then they would come to a consensus on that. The group would come to an agreement on what that score is.
Now, I come from a different school. It's not my process. All of this is in the mayor's office, the process. What we do is we review the report and decide if we want to go along with it. But the thing is, I'm from a different school. That consensus component, I hate that. I hate that. It just doesn't work for me. I'm not recommending that you change it. It's up to you. Your appeals numbers are going down from the first time you went out versus this time or what have you. But all I can ask you to do is just think about that again if you want to have that consensus as part of it.
Let me ask one more thing about this appeal that was denied. It was denied, basically. So the board never saw this point by point.
No, the board did. My understanding is the board did receive a copy of that. Is that correct? Yeah, the board actually did review a copy of that. They were able to review that, and they decided that based on the criteria for the appeals process, that didn't meet either the criteria 1 or 2.
Right, it didn't meet 1 or 2.
Right.
Yeah, but when I read it, well, okay, we'll go on.
All right. Cards from the public. We have Tina Watkins, Tim Watkins, and Parker Anderson.
Did you see? You saw their
Yeah, I just got
point
it.
by point. I mean, I have these things here.
Hi.
Why don't you?
And sit down, introduce yourself. They're bringing you a chair. And
Thank you.
grab a microphone.
Actually, good morning. What I want to do, because of the time constraint, is defer my time to my colleagues.
No, with no objection to the committee, we can do that, sure.
Okay. And so I have Tina Watkins, who led the team that prepared the grant, and Parker Anderson, who manages our human services section.
Okay. Who wants to go first?
I guess I'll go first.
Introduce yourself.
I'm Parker Anderson, General Manager, Human Services for WLCAC. Let me just say off the bat that I appreciate the challenge that the mayor's office had in trying to go through a process that involved this many outstanding agencies in a brief period of time. We appreciate the fact that they tried to do it fairly and equitably. We can only speak for our proposal, but there were material, factual errors in the review of our proposal that led to a material impact on our score. And when we made our appeal under Category 2, which has been read, which is demonstrated procedural errors in review process, or the review of the appellant's application that resulted in unequal treatment. Our contention is very clear. We were not treated equally because the scores were inaccurate and not correct. And what we're going to do in a second is give you some very concrete examples of that. We were really surprised that our appeal was not accepted for review. All we were asking was that the appeal committee pass our appeal on to the mayor's staff or the reviewing group and to look at our specific points to review them. That's all we're asking. That's all we're asking that your committee requests the mayor's staff to do in this particular case. I'd like to have Tina give a couple of examples of the specifics where it's clear that the mayor's office did not accurately and fairly judge our proposal. Tina?
And my staff actually put together the proposal for submission, and whenever you do this kind of thing, you would always hope that you are successful in the first round, but if you're not, you'd hope that you have what we assumed was the opportunity to present any demonstrated procedural errors, and that we actually have some clear examples of that. So in an optimistic fashion, we thought that this should have been pretty straightforward and pretty black and white. The best examples of this are that under the scoring rubric, we were docked for points under our operational plan, where, according to the comments, the roles and responsibilities of program staff are not defined in the operational plan. Problem with that is that the RFP didn't ask us to provide that information in the operational plan. It was asked to be provided in the organizational capacity plan section, and we did provide that, and we attached up to 9 pages worth of information about it, including job descriptions, key roles and qualifications. All of that is in our original proposal. So that's a material, just complete oversight on the review committee's part. The second really clear example of this is that, again, the comments explain that in the cost reasonableness section, the individual activity fund and the participant supportive services weren't explained in the budget narrative, and both of those items were explained really clearly on pages 21. They were numbered individually, they used exactly the same language, so it was, again, a total oversight. So our concern is that if at least those 2 items were such clear black and white mistakes in reviewing, and there were actually 15 total comments that were made that resulted in us having a lower score, then at least the other 13 that we presented that were equally black and white should be considered. We can't understand how that would have been summarily denied.
And so from our perspective, that's clearly resulted in unequal treatment. Clearly, the appeals board should have accepted the appeal and then sent it to the mayor's staff for appropriate disposition on the point-by-point analysis on our part. We have 2 minutes. A couple of comments about the fairness and equity. I've been involved in dozens of RFP processes within the city. The assumption has everyone got their scores. No one was told where they ranked, what the score of the other agencies were. We were given ranks 1 and 2, so we knew we were ranked number 2. Everyone had an equal opportunity to appeal their score. In the Community Development Department, we always tell the agencies, if you feel that there's any unequal treatment or there's any inaccuracies in the review, we encourage people to appeal. Because the first cut of the appeal is the accuracy of the score, not where you fall relative to anyone else. The only reasonable assumption on the part of the other agencies is that they looked at their score and they determined that it was accurate and they didn't appeal. We looked at our score, we found it was grossly inaccurate, and we did appeal. So from a standpoint of fairness, everyone had an equal opportunity to appeal their score, and I can only speak for the Community Development Department. We always encouraged people to appeal. The other thing that I think is important to note is that in the first round of the RFP process in the July 28th transmittal from the mayor's office, a number of agencies did appeal that process. 5 of those agencies' appeals were accepted for score review, and 2 of those appeals, the points were actually changed. So, I mean, we're really perplexed as to why we submit a very clear, point-by-point, page-by-page, highlighted document reflecting what we consider to be the inaccuracies. 5 agencies in the first round were accepted on exactly the same basis. 2 of their points were changed, and yet we weren't even given the courtesy of having our appeal further reviewed. We're just really perplexed by that. Okay. And obviously, as you can tell, it's an important program for us. It's something that we really believe in. We believe in our team, and we just like a fair hearing.
Thank you. Jeff, question?
So basically, the only response that you got to your appeal was this letter.
Actually, we haven't received that letter yet.
Oh, you haven't got that?
But we did get notice of this meeting, and I guess that's neither here nor there,
You
technically.
knew that your appeal was denied?
Right.
How did you know that?
Parker happens to be subscribed to the agendas for this session.
And I
so
dial
he
up
came
I
across
dial
it.
up the mayor's report and pull it off the internet. That's how we find out.
Wait a minute. You know what I'm going to ask Jeff when he gets back up here, but what you're describing to this committee is that you didn't find out directly about the fact that you were not going to be taken to the next level on the appeal. You
Right.
were not told that directly. You had to deduce that from the fact that
Yes.
your name is not considered number one for the purposes of the agenda on this committee?
Right.
We did get a call from your office late Friday evening because we sent all 5 council members on this committee
Yes.
documents about our
This letter.
intent. We did call the grid office and speak to Jeff Carr about our intentions to appeal the process. We didn't talk to him about the outcome of the appeal process. We were waiting for that. We were promised that we'd get notification of that within 5 days. So we've been looking for that. Bottom line is, as Parker noted, that every agency had the absolute right to appeal if they thought that their points were, unfair. And we certainly have many, many things to do and wouldn't want to waste your time or our time trying to just appeal for the sake of appeal. We only appeal when we feel that there is some factual or material error or omission in the evaluation. We'll take our knocks. We win some, we lose some. But this one was very clear to us that there had been gross material and factual omissions from by the review panel.
We're not claiming there's anything malintended. I mean, clearly they tried to make it as fair and equitable. We don't know how it happened, but factually it did. The other comment I just want to make, the reason you kind of heard me hemming and hawing, we did find out that our appeal was not granted. We did find out through the normal, public recourse, and I think it's important, that any agency, when their appeal is being rejected or whatever the disposition is, that the mayor's office make a direct call to the key person.
Or any department, or, in any appeals
But
process.
but we were not disadvantaged by that. We're not complaining that was the issue. Our issue is in black and white and within the facts.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And so are we being dismissed?
I mean, you can give a last statement if you like, unless Ms. Hahn has some questions.
Yes, I just wanted to make clear that our request is that this committee exercise its authority to either suspend the award or suspend the forward motion of this pending the disposition of our appeal to the appeal.
Okay.
Thank
Right.
you.
So you believe that your appeal fits into the criteria?
Absolutely.
Yes, we do, and in and of itself, and I don't see how it doesn't meet the same standard that the other 5 agencies that were allowed to appeal their score in round 1 were allowed.
And it was specifically Category 2, which is, again, on the basis of demonstrated procedural errors in the review process and/or the review of the appellant's application that resulted in unequal treatment. And literally, the way that we approached this was to look at the scoring rubric that we got, to compare that to our proposal response, which we had a copy of, and to see how they do or don't line up. And what we saw was that there were procedural errors, so it was pretty straightforward in that
We
respect.
tried to make it real easy for the appeal board. We brought in our proposal because we weren't supposed to introduce any new information.
Right.
We brought in the proposal. We tabbed everything, 1 through 15. We cross-referenced. We yellow highlighted. So
Right.
it was very easy to see whether we were
Right.
making it up or being, loose with our position on stuff. So we really tried to do it as professionally and as factually based as we could, notwithstanding the fact they almost had to hold me down the first time when we did our appeal. But yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to know what our
Jeff?
what our options are here.
My first question is, can you clarify, Jeff, the way in which your office communicates whenever somebody starts engaging in the appeal process?
Yeah, we actually mailed and faxed copies of the letter once it was determined that there was after the interview process, once it was determined that a group was the number one recommended group, they were mailed and faxed a letter. And then once the appeals process was completed, we mailed and faxed a copy of that letter that was dated December 2nd. So we have receipt of the fax being received.
So your You're referring to the letter dated December 2nd?
Yeah, but I'm also saying we also sent a previous letter to that
Oh,
that was
previous.
sent about, so there was the site visits and the interview process. Those were completed. A final score was determined, so we had our final recommendation pending the appeals. A letter was faxed and sent about that decision. Then the appeals process took place on December 1st, and on December 2nd, you have the letter in front of you that was faxed and sent by mail of our decision. So
You
we've
may-
notified.
Yeah, you
folks.
may want to, in the future, because email has now become the default correspondence in order for people to see dates and all that stuff, and who spoke to who and who acknowledged the fact that they even got it and maybe makes a comment or what have you. You may want, and I use the word.
I can check and see
may.
if it was also emailed
Yeah.
as well, but yeah.
I'm using the word may. I'm not telling you to. I'm
Right.
just saying you may want to include email correspondence as well, so that it all comes together and it's unequivocal that the notice was done formally, not third party, like was just described. Third party notification. And the letter you're referring to.
I don't think that's actually an accurate, just for the record, I don't think that the third-party notification is an accurate description of what took place.
I know, but I'm just clarifying what you just said and what they just said. So you're going to want to, when next time this gets heard by this committee or the council, you're going to want to clarify that.
Mhm.
And you gave us a letter, but obviously if there's any way that you could show that how the correspondence was done, and hopefully you'll have something showing that on such and such date, so-and-so from the organization actually communicated to someone in your office that they knew.
I will check on that.
Bad news? Okay. Thank you.
Let me just say, on the site visit, so that's all verbal communication? Like you ask questions and they respond?
Yeah, and then the site visit review panel then has a scoring sheet to actually score that site visit as well.
And is there any kind of official recording of who said what? Or, I mean, I can see how that ultimately is an interesting component, because at the end, if somebody challenges it, they'll say, well, we said this, and yet the report said you failed to say this. How do we make sure that that's not kind of a he said, she said piece of this RFP?
Yeah, well, there's obviously in any of these review processes, whether
I can
it's
see
the
if
verbal
if it's written
or the
down,
written.
it either is or it isn't in the report. The site visit and conversations with people, I can see
A little bit more subjective.
a little more subjective.
Well, I think what you're trying to do is take a subjective process and make it as objective as you possibly can.
Right.
But the reality is, whether it's a written
Right.
process or a review process by an interview process, there is a level of subjectivity. So I think what we're trying to say is, number one, do the people who are the reviewers, do they have conflicts of interest? Have we ensured that they actually are not favoring one group over another?
Right.
Do we have a guideline by which they can actually, that we're giving them instructions about how to follow the process in the RFP that we've set up? Do we have a scoring system for them to follow? But at the end of the day, part of what we want them to do is to use their professional expertise, whether
Right.
they were a law enforcement
Right.
person, an educator, a
Right.
researcher, a
Right.
community resident, and that diversity of
Right.
voices
I
gives
understand
us
that.
the richness.
And at the end of the day, again, these two organizations that were the final two in the Watts grid are two really wonderful organizations. But I'll tell you, when I look at their point-by-point challenge, I feel like if we left it like it was today and just continue to deny hearing their appeal, there is just a lot of stuff that I think needs to be answered. I mean, staff roles and responsibilities are not defined in the operational plan, so they lost a point on that. And yet they say it wasn't required in the operational plan. It was required in the organizational capability section where it clearly was laid out. I kind of need to know, is that true or is that not true? And if it's true, then where is the sense of fairness, or at least we we
Well, but
took this, I guess I would want you to hear this appeal and go at least and respond to their points. Otherwise, I feel like it's
We
forever.
did hear their appeal,
But
and the appeals board decided that it didn't warrant any further review by the mayor's office
So-
to change the scores. That was the recommendation from the appeals board, and the mayor's office chose to follow the recommendation from the appeals board that we had
So is
gathered.
that true or not true?
Was what true or not true?
Point.
That point.
On the section
3A.
that it was supposed to be.
I was not a part of the process of the appeals. I was not a member of the appeals board to be a part of the process of their thinking. So I can't, regurgitate back what their process was in terms of making that decision.
There was like 15 comments that were specifically, according to the proposal, just flat out wrong.
But again,
How
each
is that
organization, the Los Angeles Conservation Corps could have come with the same proposal, could have come with the same kind of response going point by point as well. So if we
But they
review
didn't.
this,
But as they said, anybody could have appealed.
right, because they successfully
Right,
won the award.
right.
So I don't believe I can't, speak for them, but one might assume that because they were successful in the RFP process and they were the number one
Right.
rated proposal, that they didn't find the need
Right.
to appeal their score, which was actually already ranked them as the number one
Right.
scoring agency.
Yeah,
Wait,
again, it's just,
Doesn't that point make it very difficult for the mayor's office to take an appeal to the next level? What if all of a sudden you did take it to the next level and you gave them, hold on, you gave them, realized, you know what, hey, they deserved another 3 points. Then all of a sudden, Watts Labor Community Action Committee goes up to 118.58. Then all of a sudden, they're the ones that you're going to be recommending to get the contract. But LA Conservation Corps, since they didn't appeal, now that begs the question, would they get a window of opportunity to appeal?
No, I think the
But
broader,
you get the dilemma.
yeah, and I think the
mayor's
broader,
office-
the broader
the mayor's office or any organization would be in.
And I think the broader view of the mayor's office is that we selected qualified individuals. We developed a fair process in terms of how to evaluate proposals. We trained those folks to do that. We had multiple layers and levels of review, including written review, an oversight committee to make sure there was not any disparaging, things, not consistent across the 6 areas, to look at that, and then to actually do site visits with a site visit review panel. We have confidence in our reviewers as to the expertise that they use to develop, to review those proposals, and we stand behind their review process. We wanted to make sure through the appeals process to determine whether or not there was anything in that process that unfairly hindered a particular organization in that review process. And the appeals board decided that there was nothing in that process that was inherently unfair or
well, maybe not
unequal.
inherently unfair, but.
Yeah, but mistakes get made.
Yeah,
Right, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree with this organization that came before this committee to explain how they feel that their appeal should have went to the next level. Without prejudice, I still wonder, how could you reconcile with the idea that if the person who comes in first doesn't appeal, and the points are so close, and the person who comes in second appeals, and then for some reason the appeal process says, you know what, they have a point here, let's take it under review, and then they do score a couple more points. That inadvertently creates a big dilemma coming back to the fairness issue. I'm not saying it happened here, but sometimes, as human beings, we take a look around the corner and say, well, we don't want to go there because that even opens up a bigger Pandora's box. So that begs the question, on the technical point that this organization just made, of we were asked to put into our document in this section, this element. And according to our scoring, it was missed
Right.
in another section. But with all due respect, what they had requested was in our report, in the segment that we understood it was supposed to be in.
Right.
Not the segment it wasn't supposed to be in, right? So on that technical point alone, I would think that not that they should get more points, that's not up to me.
Right.
That's up to the mayor's office in your process.
Right.
But just on that point alone, I would think that would beg the question, okay, let's see.
Right.
Did the group make an error? I know you have a lot of confidence in them. I have a lot of confidence in my staff too. But sometimes they do things and I say, what were you thinking? And then at the end of the conversation, they say, you know what? I made a mistake. I'm sorry. And then behind closed doors, my staff is supposed to tell me when I make a mistake.
Really?
And then, yes, behind closed doors. And then I'm supposed to say, you know what? That's why I have you here. Because I'm not perfect, you're not perfect. You just pointed something out. And a better policy, hopefully, is a result of that, if it's that big of a deal. But in this particular case, again, I don't have any prejudice toward their arguments or what have you.
I don't either.
But on that point,
Yeah.
if they pointed something out, and it is that black and white as to whether or not what they were asked for was within their proposal, and it was within the segment that they were supposed to put it in, and it was pointed out on their scoring that you didn't have that in another segment, then that in and of itself would think that it begs the question, well, let's look and see what happened. Maybe there was a mistake made. And no intent, no malintent, anything like that, but maybe there was a mistake made.
I mean, I'm going to sound like a broken record. So, I mean, I think the process we have outlined is fair. It's been transparent. It's clear what we did. And I think we stand by our recommendations at this point. I don't really know what else to say.
So basically, you respectfully feel confident about the process and this particular, commenting on this particular appeal, et cetera, and you still stand by the recommendation?
Indeed.
Okay. City Attorney, what authority or what ability does the council have when it comes to the 6 contracts that are recommended from the mayor's office that we approve? Do each contract stand on their own? Are we required to approve all 6 in whole, or all 6 disapprove? Or can we say we're okay with this one, this one, this one going forward, but this one here, we're not going to move it forward?
It's not clear to me, Deputy City Attorney Teresa Lujan. I'm not familiar with the whole process, the RFP. It would depend on the reason for moving some of them forward and keeping one back. I think that's a possibility.
No. I'm not talking about the mayor's process. The council doesn't have authority within the mayor's process. They are their own elected office. This is not a department. Okay? What I'm talking about, now that this item is before the council can, we can approve these and move them forward to the council floor. Once the council votes on it, then these contracts are let out, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. But my question to you is, are we required to approve all 6 that are before us contracts? Is there separate contracts for separate purposes and each one stands alone, I presume? Okay. Are we required to approve all 6 or disapprove all 6, or do we have the right to approve individual contracts and hold certain ones back and not approve those as we move forward through our council process?
I think you have the right to make an independent determination.
On each contract?
Correct.
Although they're presented as one item in one item before the council?
I believe so.
One agendized item, I mean. Go ahead.
Yes, I believe so. But whether or, at the end of the day, the reason for we would have to know why there was a different determination on a particular contract, and there is a possibility that if it's a procedural error that would apply to
One and not others, or two instead
or
of
to
the-
all of them, for
or all
example,
of them.
that council may have to ask the mayor's office to redo the whole process again. I'm not saying that's
That's not the only option.
Right, but-
You're
but-
expressing one.
But that may be a possibility, but I do believe that you can make a recommendation as to one or all of them. It can be, one or more can be different from the mayor's recommendation.
Well, then, please clarify for me. Each one of these contracts stands on their own, correct? As far as
It's not
the
whole
council
thing.
approving each
Yes,
contract. Okay.
that part is correct.
For example, we could have agendized these as item number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 separately, and then voted on each one separately in this committee.
I think you can do that, but it opens it up. It opens
I'm
up
not
the.
saying we're gonna. What I'm trying to get to the point here is, it's my interpretation that each contract is in fact, does in fact stand on its own when it comes to the council process.
That's correct.
Okay, that's enough, that's fine. We have another comment card, Shalon Joseph? Well, the CAO report isn't in, so we're gonna have another bite at the apple in this committee. I'm just not gonna be here. Yes?
Good morning, Councilman. Shalon Joseph on behalf of the Los Angeles County Public
Maybe.
Defender's Office. I just had a brief comment as to the review board for the first level and the oversight committee. Again, our office works significantly and thoroughly with youth who are incarcerated in the juvenile system. We do have 21 social workers in our juvenile division who work with gang-involved youth. We do believe that the grid areas cover county areas and county kids possibly.
They're
And
all within the county.
Within the county, correct.
Because the city of Los Angeles is entirely within the county.
Correct. We were more than willing to sit down with Mr. Carr and discuss the programs that we have, but I'm concerned again that every time we talk about any type of review board, that the public defenders is left out as a member of the review board. I believe that Mr. Carr indicated that there was a person from education, law enforcement, either the DA or the city attorney, a gang expert, a community resident, and a person from social service at the first level. Again, we're not included at all. And in the oversight, he did mention criminal justice system, but I would bet that the criminal justice representative is not a public defender's member of the public defender's office. I think that usually we're left out because of a lack of ignorance with how much we are involved with youth in the city of Los Angeles. For example, we did have, I did participate in the meeting with the Board of Supervisors where the sheriff was there. And as part of his plan that he's pushing, the GEOC plan, he didn't even think about the public defender's office just because he did not know about the work that we're doing.
Did you think about the DA's office?
Of course, of course,
The
there's a
sheriff's
representative.
department?
Yes, of course.
And probation?
Of course,
Okay.
of course. And so I'm just, again, urging that in these discussions, when there are, may I continue?
Continue.
When there are review boards, that the public defender's office or a representative is included. And the reasons for that are twofold. One, we work in the criminal justice system that deals with these youth in every single courthouse that there is. And two, we know the programs who are really dealing with gang-involved youth. I think that this committee has come across a lot of agencies that say that they are dealing with gang-involved youth and getting funding for that purpose, but when in reality, when you look at it, they really aren't dealing with the population. And we know through experience from working and referring our youth to these programs who's actually working with the youth and who are actually working to make a difference. And so I guess my request at this point is that we just be considered as part of the process.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. That concludes the public comment cards for this committee on item number 2. Is there anybody else here who wishes to speak to item number 2 on behalf of the public? Seeing and hearing none, public comment on item number 2 is now closed. Mr. Carr, I need to ask you a question. Is the Public Defender's Office part of these panels that you've convened?
Well, they weren't a part of this review panel, but actually I think that's a good suggestion. We're looking for good people, so we'll certainly take that under consideration. I think particularly the last speaker spoke specifically about gang-involved youth. Obviously, this was more focused on prevention, trying to catch kids before they get involved in youth, but we have a intervention RFP process and review process coming up very shortly. We would welcome to have some representation from the office as well.
And don't feel bad, because when I wrote Chief Cardenas, I was way too ignorant about what the public defender's role should be, and if I'd have known better, I would have definitely wrote them to make sure that they were extremely involved. Unfortunately, as a result, it seems like police departments, sheriff departments, probation departments, and district attorneys seem to be enjoying a lot more of that money than I intended them to enjoy, instead of having it spread out across other entities and organizations who can bring more to the table, or, excuse me, different aspects of the table. So thank you. Thank you for taking that into account. Again, as the previous item we covered in this committee, we don't have the CAO report. When is the CAO going to have that report ready? It's getting more and more fun every day that goes by.
Good morning, council members. Madeline Rackley from the CAO. I have written my report, and it will be reviewed by my office and released as soon as possible.
No. Don't give me as soon as possible. We are on Monday.
Yes.
Do you anticipate that you can have it, be conservative, by tomorrow, by Wednesday, by Thursday, by Friday? Because this committee is going to hold off on this item until your report is published and made public.
We can commit to the end of today or early tomorrow morning.
Okay, so, all right. Thank you very much. So, at the latest, sometime on Tuesday, this report will become public, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then it'll be posted within that same day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So
As I said
we're
earlier,
not gonna vote on this.
this committee will, thank you very much. This committee will reconvene for items of urgency as soon as possible. It is possible that this committee will reconvene as early as sometime this week. It will be without my presence, as I will be out of the country. So the vice chair and the rest of the committee members will have to contend with pulling their schedules together to have a hearing of this committee. And item number 2, we'll hold that item in committee for the next scheduled hearing, and hopefully very, very soon, because we'd like to make sure that things that don't get held up for administrative reasons, and they get held up for the right reasons. And right now, the only thing that's holding us up on this at this moment from getting out of this committee is the CAO report. So once that's posted, this committee will convene again. Like I said, it's my expectation, and I've let my colleagues, I will be letting my colleagues know that they better free up their schedules so that they can have this committee, so we're not an impediment to the process. Okay? So hold that item in committee, item number 2. We'll now move to item number 3.
Item number 3, motion, Cardenas Perry, relative to executing contract amendments with various LA Bridges 2 contractors. On December 3rd, 2008, the Housing, Community, and Economic Development Committee approved this motion.
Yes, Jeff Carr again from the Mayor's Office. This is simply a motion to extend the Bridges 2 gang intervention contracts for 3 months for our current 4 Bridges agencies to ensure that we don't have a gap in intervention services between now and when we finish the RFP process for intervention.
Okay. And no impact to the general fund, correct?
No, this is all money that we have in the mayor's contractual services budget that was already approved in the budget process.
Is Safe Passages a part of this?
It's under the existing contracts for the 4 agencies that were listed in the motion in terms of their Bridges 2 contracts. Some of those, I'm not sure exactly what underneath each one of those contracts is included. It's up to the individual agency and their, the scope of work they've already got with the mayor's office to continue. The intent is to continue that for 3 months.
So far, this is just a straight-up extension of the current
Extension of
contract.
3 months of the existing current contract.
And the Pat Brown Institute, what's their involvement in
They're not
part of the extension?
they're not part of this extension.
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
All right.
And I think I have an issue with the safe passage. I think they're not a part of it, so I'm gonna have to figure out how to get some more funding, because that's a critical program.
Well, children, youth, and their families, my understanding, are still going to do Kid Watch.
Kid Watch is being done, beyond January 1st. And as you know from the last time we were in committee, we are working with Children, Youth, and Commission on Children, Youth, and Families to look at the whole issue of safe passages and safe schools through the city. I think we're going to come back sometime in February to report as to what progress we've made in terms of developing a kind of a framework for the city. I know we've been having meetings on that.
Okay. And there are, aside from the Pat Brown Institute, there are a couple of organizations that are developing training, correct?
Yes.
Intervention training, things of that nature.
Right.
Not intervention training, but training that is part of the scope of what we expect interventionists to be involved in, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. We do have one public any other questions before we go to public comment? Okay. We do have a public comment card. Alder Midal. Cummings? Mike?
Mike Cummings.
Michael Cummings.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Elder Mike Cummings with Wlcac Outreach Ministry. We provide safe passage, gang intervention for the Jordan High School area. My comment and question was on the extension of the Bridges 2 program. I was wondering, was our contract was being extended in that for the next 3 months because of our funding was tied up in that through Bridges 2? That's my question and that's my comment.
Yeah, it's my understanding, and Jeff can help me clarify this, we've had extensive comments in this committee from Community Development Department, and they were the ones that were actually funding most of, not all of, because they're all over the map when it comes to safe passages. And it's my understanding that year to year to year, they were doing it with savings within the department. So unfortunately, it was being done as a good thing, but it wasn't being done through the budget process specifically. It was being done on an annual, ongoing basis. Luckily for all of you and the communities who needed this service, the department would actually take savings as the year went on, and they would pull it over and then fund these projects. Pretty much that's what happened. But the mayor's office, it's my understanding that they did not specifically address that issue. The council hasn't addressed that issue. So at this point in time, the mayor's office didn't get specific funding for those safe passages. So therefore, the safe passages that will go on in the future, in the near future, until we can find a permanent appropriate fix, if and when that time comes, until then, some of the contracts will hopefully be able to absorb that on a case-by-case basis, correct? Yeah, as far as absorb some of those services with the funding that they're getting to do intervention and prevention programs.
Yes, sir. I was just wondering because it's, we put a lot of time and effort in that.
Oh, yeah, there's
we
no question
actually
about that.
we actually worked 3 years for free. Through the Councilwoman Hans made a motion through council for the last 2.5, maybe 3 years. We decreased the crime 65% with children traveling to and from school. And in my heart, I hate to see that go to waste when January 1st come, that it's nobody going to be out there to advocate for the ones that can't advocate for themselves.
Oh, absolutely.
And it just I'm sad right now that it won't be.
I am too.
I really am, because we built the relationship with signing safe havens with all the businesses. We have the community on board and watch that's never been on board before, working with the community and working with the police department. And what we have now, the way we got things set up, if it's a disconnect, we might not never get it back. And that's why I just come to plead my case today, sir.
So my recommendation to you is to talk to the powers that be right now, all the community entities you talked about right now, Ms. Han's office and also the mayor's office, et cetera, children, youth, and their families. Hopefully is going to figure out a way to play a bigger role because they will be continuing Kid Watch, but not necessarily
It's different. than
Yeah,
Safe
it
Passage.
is
Completely
different.
different.
But Kids Watch don't
but
even
not-
have, it don't even have no funds in it.
not safe passages.
Yeah.
So right now, safe passages is left to the devices of each community to try to figure out how to continue it. That's the truth.
Yes,
I'm not
sir.
pulling any punches. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
here to
know,
lie to you.
And we're going to try to work on it, but it's upsetting to me too,
Yeah.
because if you want to talk about gang prevention, it's safe passage. These kids are being recruited to join the gang on the way to school
On the way
for
home.
protection. So, I mean, that was always our idea. You know, the gangs are saying, we'll give you safe passage, but you have to join our gang. Here we have an organization that provides that,
Yeah.
keeps kids from being hurt, and keeps them from the temptation to join a gang for protection. We should be paying organizations to provide that protection, not allowing gangs to provide that protection.
I'd just like to just thank the council for all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And at some point, we're not going to always have to piecemeal this. You know, we're going to have an overall strategy that funds these organizations continually, and they don't have to worry about it. If Prop A had passed, we would be in a very different situation right now.
Okay, so at this time, it'll be a recommendation to this committee to adopt the motion. We do not have a quorum, so this item will move forward. Now we move to item number 4.
Item number 4, communication from the mayor and CAO report relative to notification of application authority to accept 2008 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice System Grant Award in the amount of $1,492,326 for the city's community law enforcement and recovery clear program and related actions. On November 3rd, 2008, the Public Safety Committee approved the recommendations as contained in the October 16th, 2008 CAO report.
I just have one question for you. Apparently, each clear site includes an operational team made up of representatives from the LAPD, District Attorney's Office, City Attorney's Office, Probation Department. Is there any reason why, or is there any way that we could change that and have the Public Defender's Office have somebody as part of this operational team?
Council Member Laura Shin from the Mayor's Office. I think in previous discussions you've made that recommendation, and our policy team is amenable to looking into that situation. And we don't have someone from our policy team here today, but we will communicate that back to them.
Okay, so what I'm going to ask is that you report back to this committee sometime in January. What is the first week we get back, or the last day of January?
Okay.
If we're here. And report back as to what the structure is going to be, and if for some reason it doesn't make sense to have the public defenders, then you're going to have to make sense of that before this committee, because, again, don't feel bad. I've been working on this for 10 years, and only in the last couple of years have I realized that we've totally left them out, and they are an integral part of what we're trying to do here. And if you notice, everybody on your list here that I read off is all suppression is their primary mandate. Are they purely suppression? No, they're not. But that's their primary mandate. And the Public Defender's Office deals with this same constituency, but at the same time, their primary responsibility is not suppression, not even close. So I think we're going to need that balance.
Okay.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, no more questions from the committee. Is anybody here from the public to speak on item number 4? Seeing and hearing none, public comment on item number 4 is now closed. With that, again, a recommendation of the committee is to approve the CAO report. See, on that one, we had a CAO report. Good. Item number 5, again, we don't have the CAO report. It was, again, as I mentioned earlier, it was just released, and it didn't have enough time for it to be posted for public review. So this item as well will be put over to the next committee hearing of this committee, which hopefully will even be as soon as this week. Okay, so we'll hold that item in committee and hold it over to the next committee meeting. And that takes us to item number 6.
Item number 6, communication from the mayor relative to the CLEAR program for fiscal year 2008-2009, also referred to the Public Safety and Personnel Committees.
Okay. And on this one, we don't have a CAO report either. Is there anybody here Is anybody here from the mayor's office to speak on this item?
Laura Shin from the mayor's office. We did put together a report for some position authorities. It's currently with the CAO's office. The report has not been released at this time.
Okay. Any idea when that report will be ready?
Melissa Fleming with the CAO. It should be released by the end of the day tomorrow.
Oh, excellent. So both of them.
That's correct.
All right. All right. Good, good. Well, that being the case, then this item, hold on, I'll save that statement for a second. When this is heard, unless you have the answer right now, if there are only 5 new sites, why does the mayor's office recommend 6 detectives and 6 sergeants? The second question to you is going to be that the mayor's office report indicates that the cost per city attorney is $174,000, or a grand total of $874,000 for 5. Why is the mayor's office requesting a round figure of $1 million for city attorneys in recommendation number 3? So when it's heard before the committee, just be ready to answer those questions, unless you want to do it now.
If it's okay to
Yeah.
wait until
Okay,
then?
that's fine. So you know that's part of what you'll be discussing when it comes back to committee.
Okay.
That being the case, is there anybody here to speak on item number 6 by the public? Anybody here from the public to speak on item number 6? Seeing and hearing none, public comment on item number 6 is now closed. With that, that concludes the 6 items on the agenda that have been covered by this committee and agendized by this committee. Is there anybody here for general public comment? I do not see any general public comment cards submitted to this committee. I do not see anybody coming forward for general public comment to this committee. With that, general public comment to this committee is now closed. With that, this committee is now adjourned.